Kia ora tātou. Ki noi tātou, let us pray. Hei mua koe a mātou I hoa, hei tohu a mātou mahi katoa. Ko koe anō hoki ai whakakahi a mātou. Kia whai gloria koe a mātou mahi katoa. He mea tīmata, he mea mahi. He mea whakoti roto I a koe. Kia whiwhi a hoki mātou ki tō roto nui te mea ata whai tēnei nei e koe. Ko I karaiti hoki. Tō mātou ariki. Amen. Translated, bless our hui.
Pardon. Welcome to worship the Mayor, the Chief Executive, Council Officers. Welcome to Ms. Stewart and Sarah from Whakakautahi. And we move to apologies. We have an apology for Mr. Andrew Gaddam, an apology from lateness for Ms. Meister, who at this point is not a member of the committee, but will be subject to approval of the paper. I acknowledge no, that's not one actually. Thank you. I just acknowledge that Mr. Lyons is sitting in at the moment with the meeting and is one of the two potential cycling advisory people that the committee will note later on. So welcome to Mr. Lyons. I just ask if there's any declaration of interest in relation to any of the papers before us this afternoon.
Declaration, Madam Chair, but I'm going to speak to parts of the report.
Thank you, Mr. You don't have a specific issue of conflict, though, I don't believe, Councillor Burdett. We all live somewhere with and need a road for transport. Thank you. So then we move to the confirmation of the non-confidential minutes, which appear on page 4. Moved by Councillor Burdett. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Worsnop. I open the minutes for discussion. Mr. Tupera.
Yes, Madam Chair, just a couple of spelling errors. They could be noted. Paragraph 11.3, the word whakamana here, so that should be WHAKAMANAHIA. And also over the page under secretarial note, reference to te waka, that should be kotahi, K-O-T-A-H-I. Kia ora.
Thank you. Do one over the page. Can you just give us the bullet point?
So that's on page 9, and it's bullet point 3 under subheading secretarial note. Te waka, that should be kotahi.
Correct. Thank you very much for those two corrections. Thank you, Ms. Stewart.
And just to correct my position title, it is for Central North Island, not.
A Central North Island.
Yes.
Central.
Central, not Lower.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Worsnop, Councillor Worsnop.
Just in the interest of being a nuisance, item 13.1, engine braking. Is that possible to have that moved to the action sheet so that we can follow up on behalf of our petitioners? Thank you.
What number? It wasn't 13.
13.1, it's on the state highway, the area that they'd like engine braking restrictions. I think, oh, sorry, page 5, item 13.1.
I had it marked as well. So we'd like an update on that, please. I'm not sure whether you can update us later in your report. Thank you very much. There's probably several other things that we want to have updated. Do you have anything else, Councillor Worsnop? And I'd like an update on Busby's Hill, which I'm sure you will have in the report for later. Councillor Worsnop, Councillor Burdett, have you got some issues that you wish to flag for later?
Page 7, item reports the Chief Executive and Staff Confirmation. The council plans have been done in draft since 2000. These were taken back to the community to see if the priorities remain the same for those communities. We need to ensure that we have the funding pool available to draw down on works in the roading corridor. What exactly does that mean?
Would you like to respond? Thank you, Ms. Noble.
So through you, Chair, that just means that when we set our budgets to the long-term plan and annual plans, we need to make sure that we have the right resource set aside for the works identified by our townships. And obviously there's a Waka Kotahi component to that as well that we need to do our best to ensure we have support for through the regional land transport plan.
Madam Chair. Joe, how many of these communities have they been back to?
Through you, I'd have to consult with the hub responsible for those township plans to give you an update. So that I believe they're doing regular updates to the operations committee.
Okay, we can follow that up. Thank you. Can we follow that up through the minutes, please?
And page 9. Secretarial note. Information on Koparoa Hill, which is out in one lane, will be brought back to the next meeting. Is that this meeting?
Ms. Stewart will respond to that
Yes, I'm happy to do that now, or it's part of the presentation.
now if you wish. Thank you.
So progress on Koparoa Hill.
Can you use your red button because we will be live streaming. Thank you.
Okay.
You don't need to bring it closer to you.
It should be
but
good.
Just have it on while you speak.
Koparoa Hill is currently at one lane, as you know, and it will remain to be one lane right through this season with work not scheduled to commence on that section of road until next summer construction season at the earliest. The site, as everybody here is very well aware of, is particularly challenging for us to manage and has been for many, many years. The team are working very hard on a medium to long-term solution for that section, but that is requiring extensive work on the design and working with our technical teams. So it's probably not the information or the update that you were hoping for, but being very transparent. We're aware of how important that section of road is, but it will remain as one lane until we get the detailed plans approved and construction can commence once that happens.
Madam Chair,
Would you like to use your
that
red button?
really, from my point of view, next summer, this is a highway, a main highway. And it's been like that for the best part of 15 months. I get a hard time, I don't know about you fellas, about this. And I think it's appalling that it's left in that state. I understand perfectly the technical difficulties, but hey, surely you're a big outfit, you can do better than that.
Thank you, Councillor Burdett. We'll leave that for the moment. Welcome, Ms. Meister, which your colleague was welcomed at the beginning of the meeting. We haven't moved to that paper yet. Do you have an agenda in front of you? The whole agenda? No, Ms. Khan will give you a copy of the agenda. Thank you. Is there any further matters arising from the minutes, please? And if not, then we had a mover and seconder, Councillor Burdett and Councillor Worsnop. I'll put the meeting, all those in favour that the minutes be signed with those two amendments and corrections of spelling as a true and correct record, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. So we move to the action sheet. Yes, thank you, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, just when we could expect to see that project plan for the cycleways, due date 17th of November.
I was just going to ask Mr. Hadfield, because I did see Mr. Hadfield in the room. It has Mr. Hadfield's name beside it. Is it part of the paper that was on the end of our agenda today, Mr. Hadfield?
Yes, that's correct. That's the idea, was just to give an update. So instead of trying to fit it into that small sheet, I thought we'd give you a paper. So it's attached.
It'll be contained within a later item on today's agenda.
Yep.
That's correct. Thank you.
But we will be providing copies
It is in your agenda,
The
Councillor
copy.
Cranston.
of the. Yeah, the reports. Yeah,
It's
but I
at
want the
page
project
38.
plan. Project plan is what I want to see.
You can,
It's not the report.
let's develop that further once we come to the paper and expand on your query if you're happy with that. Thank you. I have a question with respect to the second item, item 11.2, and my query was how much budget remains available for that work, which with respect to expenditure on wharves, and there's some script in this document about how and why, what some of it wasn't spent, and I wondered how much budget is still left from the last financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, our finances aren't carried forward each financial year, so that's because it's not a project as such, it's just an operational budget line. So we have new budgets each year per annum. We have $100,000 each financial year.
But so, and if it's not used in the financial year, are we saying we're losing it?
Yes, correct.
Effectively, yes. It's used
Sorry,
by,
yes, correct.
by some other department.
No, that would have to be a question to finance what they do.
Right.
with it. Yeah.
Thank you. And just there's one item over the page. If there's no, well, we've had the information on Koko Aroa, and I'm sure we'll bring it up in the chief in the Waka Kotahi's formal report to the meeting, Councillor Burdett. So if we move from those items I'll bring up to our first agenda item, which is page 13, item 21272. And that is the appointment of community advisors to represent walking and cycling. You have the paper in front of you. The applications were treated in exactly the same way as other community advisors were appointed to this committee at the beginning of this term of council. I wrote this paper, and Mr. Councillor Burdett and myself interviewed the applicants, and we would like to advise you that the skills that each bring are quite different to one another and complementary to the work of the Regional Transport Committee, and it's our recommendation that both individuals be appointed. Thank you for being here today. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation on page 14? Thank you. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Walsnott. Councillor Burdett,
Yeah.
you're seconding?
Yes.
Did you wish to speak?
No.
Councillor Cranston, you abstained earlier. Did you? Mr. Tupera.
Through you, Madam Chair, ngami kia korua. Welcome to you both. I support and applaud the appointment or you joining this committee. I mentioned one or two meetings ago or hui ago, back in the day when I used to cycle to and from school. It's a completely different situation now in terms of safety. And also there are much less, or there aren't as many kids cycling around town or to school and back these days. One of the concerns I have, and I look forward to your input in regards to safety, it's about the roundabouts. It's about the volume of traffic that we have, the trucks. It's also about cycle safety. Most kids you see these days are having to cycle on footpaths because it's safer, particularly when you get to the roundabouts. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can develop that safety side of things, which would in turn encourage, I think, our kids to start getting back on bikes. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll put that to the recommendation to the meeting that appoints both Ms. Ingrid Meister and Mr. Jason Lyons as additional community advisors to the Regional Land Transport Committee. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for both making yourselves available. The protocols are, if you wish, you may remove your mask in the meeting, but we do wear our masks in the public parts of the Gisborne District Council. Makes hearing and recording the meeting a lot easier for our officers if we aren't trying to speak for a mask. So thank you both, and we are welcome to the committee. I move to the next item, which is report 21267 on page 20. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We just have Miss Charlotte Knight, who's going to talk to the report. Did you want to come to the
Forward
to the
and
top table?
Thank you, Ms. Knight. While we're just moving, I should have explained to each of you committee members, we use the speaker with the red button while we're speaking, but we need to learn to remember to turn it off because we can only have 2 or 3 speakers on at any one time or we get a lot of feedback. And our meetings are Zoom to the public if they wish, so we could have, Ms. Con can probably tell us while we're just getting organised, how many people have we got watching today, Ms. Con? Yeah, well, I'm looking. 2. There we go. I knew I could usually see it, but I couldn't see it from this distance.
Through you, Jean, can I see it on the YouTube? This is the meeting. So you have to be. There's a lot of staff.
Thank you very much. It's just good information for members of the public. Welcome and thank you for your time.
So this report presents some information on council's progress against their activity program and the performance measures from July to September 2021, which was the first quarter under the newly adopted Te Tarawhiri Regional Land Transport Plan. So under the plan, there was a new monitoring framework brought in. So you'll see the format of the report is different to previous sort of monitoring reports you will have seen. And so the performance measures targets are for the period of the RLTP unless otherwise sort of stated in that framework. And some of the targets can be reported on more frequently than others due to the frequency of the data collection or the publication of the reports that that data comes from. Yeah, so that's kind of an intro to the report. I won't go into the report in detail unless there's any particular areas that you'd like me to go on.
Thank you very much. I'll open it to the meeting for questions. Thank you, Councillor Cranston, and then Mr. Tupara.
Yeah, thank you. Page 27, bottom of. First quarter tracking year-to-date budget 1 million. Got a couple of overspends there or unbudgeted expenditure. Just wanting some explanation around the 527 on walking and cycling project. What was that project? And any explanation around the unbudgeted expenditure. And also it goes into the Potai Nelson, which is over budget 324.
Thank you.
I might pass that one over to Dave or Donna. And just to also note some of this commentary around the budget overs and unders, some of the councillors will see in the quarterly report as well.
Right. Did you hear the question, Mr. Hetfield? Oh, could you repeat the question, Councillor Cranston? Have you got the speaker on?
I did have. Bottom of page 27 where we've got the expenditure, the overspend on the cycle and walkway project. It just says walking and cycling project, so I'm not sure exactly what it relates to, that 527 unbudgeted expenditure. And then there's also Potai Nelson, which has got 327 over budget, 324. So.
So what there was funding we had from last financial year, what Kotahi that had to be, that wasn't carried over. So we had the money. It was just a process for this year that should have just happened. But so we've just rectified it. So in terms of the funding, it was just the phasing side of it. So can I say for that 527, we had it last year. It just wasn't carried over, and that's what this bit does. Yeah, so
perhaps unbudgeted is not the best use.
Unbudgeted wasn't the right word. It's carried, yeah, it's phasing. So it wasn't an additional cost, if that's what you mean, Councillor.
Mr. Tupara.
Kia ora no tātou. I wear 2 hats as a community advisor on this committee. One is tangata whenua and the second hat I wear is environmental. And I'm interested at page 24 in your report, and thank you for your report, where there's reference to climate change. The question I have is whether incentive financial support is given to our council for us to involve ourselves, this is our community, in climate change in regards to transportation. I'm assuming that is the case. What I observe in the report, it's being led by central government. They're still planning. And a plan or plans are due to be provided. But in your work to date, has there been any indication from the government that they're going to support financially the Gisborne District Council involving itself in implementing their policies in regards to climate change, emission issues and that kind of thing. Kia ora.
So through you, Chair, that is a often repeated request we put in our submissions to central government, requesting funding support to implement the changes we know are needed to reach those ambitious reduction targets for greenhouse gases. Waka Kotahi may be able to speak to the funding available through their systems to support, for example, modal change, moving away from reliance on vehicles to active transport.
Thank you. Anything? Councillor, did you have something further, Mr. Cooper? Councillor Worsnop?
Few different things here. Just on page 24, it talks about the barriers to obviously delivering what we've planned to achieve, being weather events and COVID-19. Just do we have some clarity around whether or not under the traffic light system we are less likely in the event that COVID is worse, that we are less likely to have to cease work, and the extent to which the recent emergency events that will likely result in emergency works, do they have any impact on our ability to resource the current demands? Sort of two parts there.
So through you, Chair, I'll speak to the COVID point and then maybe Dave or Donna can speak to the emergency works. So in terms of the traffic light framework, obviously we're in the most restrictive band status at the moment, but there is the ability to impose tougher regional or sub-regional restrictions. And if those were imposed and, for example, boundary restrictions were imposed, then that could be one aspect that impacts delivery of programs. Otherwise, we are at the most restrictive level. Donna or Dave, do you have any comments on the emergency works question?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, some of them are known, like the supply issues, and that's well known as certain suppliers. So some of the, for instance, timber, we've actually had to look at redesigning designs for some of our retaining walls, because we've been told anywhere between 6 to 8 months, depending on the type of materials. There's an obvious, we're working with our suppliers, contractors, our workforces. They've got their internal process they're working through with staff, and there's no doubt that that's had an impact on some of our delivery. And so until more legislation becomes clear, and as each contractor goes and the people go through their HR processes, but you can certainly notice the productivity level is reduced.
Thank you. That was obviously along the COVID lines. Just Dave, your obviously we had emergency works that were already part of our work program before the event of about 3 weeks ago. Do we have an understanding of the scope of new works that emerged from that and its likelihood of impinging on our program that was otherwise planned?
Through the chair, I'll respond to that one, Councillor Wilson. So we're very pleased to actually advise that from the November 21 state of emergency, our roading network held up incredibly well. We've only had 4 to 5 large sites known. The remainder was initial response, clearing small slips. And a lot of that is to do with the hard work that our contractors have delivered for us and with our drainage maintenance and culvert clearing programs. So in this month's claim that comes from our main contractor, Downer, which we actually receive tomorrow, they'll be identifying the full costs associated with that November 21 state of emergency. I've already advised Waka Kotahi that we will be putting in a request for funding for that, but it's unknown at this stage, but it's nowhere near to the degree that prior ones have been.
It's really good to hear. Yeah, welcome that news, definitely. Just another point on page 29, where it talks about intersection improvements. I presume, reading about the Palmerston Road roundabout, that is confirmed that that will then be a roundabout rather than anything else.
Yes, yes, that's correct. It's gone through to the Chief Executive's report as well, just for updating in the councils. we're just getting some feedback from some of the, obviously the stakeholders, BDO, Spices and Walking Cycling and CCS as well. We're just getting their last bits of feedback and then we're hoping to procure that in the early new year.
I have some questions, thank you. On the bottom of page 28, where we talk about the summer campaign around road safety, which was due to, was at the point of this paper was being written, was being prepared, but it was due to start yesterday. So has that started, and what do we know what it is, or what the focus is, please?
Through the chair, we can go back to the road safety coordinator for that information. That team member actually feeds in through a different activity group now, but we can get that information and bring it forward for you.
Thank you. And then with respect to the Stout Street raised platforms, which is traffic calming, which it says work is progressing. I think it would be good if we had a formal update on what that work is, because that was something sought by members of the public over a period of time. So can we understand, maybe you can give us a brief update now, and the same with respect to Tyndall Road, and exactly what stage is that at, please? Thank you, Mr. Hadfield.
Yes, just with Stout Street, we've gone through the designs and we're getting that priced up. There is a phasing because Palmerston, we weren't expecting the Palmerston traffic signals project to jump the queue. That was because of an accident. So we've been trying to progress both at the same time. So we're hoping to get that project procured to market early February. That's at the Stout Street.
And what about Tyndall Road, please? Because that will be important to the residents there.
Yeah, at this stage, there's no progress on that. And just because the what's happened with the Palmerston Peel Street roundabout, that's pushed up and we've had to push other projects down to try and fit the resourcing.
So that's not quite what the report's telling us.
For Tyndall, yeah.
Yes. This says work is progressing on Tyndall. Thank you. And there's a spelling mistake on where there is. Thank you. I have one just further question, which was over under the emergency works. It's not inconsistent with Councillor Worsnock. So it's the last paragraph, the 57 sites that require more detailed designs. Does that actually include the 2020 projects as well?
Yeah.
2020 damage.
That's exactly right. That's the 2020. Yeah.
Thank you. One more question, Councillor Worsnock, by all means.
I know we've already set our targets, but on page 33, just under inclusive access, I imagine our new committee members will probably be quite disappointed to see that our RLPT target is for more than 5% mode sharing. I'm sure we can do better than, I mean, we're currently at 4.9, which means that we are aiming for a 0.1% increase in spite of all of the effort that's going into cycleways and cycle trail plans and all sorts of things. So just, is that an appropriate target? And do we have the ability to move it at all at this stage?
You could go through the process of setting a new target if you wished, and I could find out some more about what you would need to do that.
Good,
Yeah.
thank you. For next meeting, thank you. I must admit that kind of thing. Because the same applies to the Gizzy bus. You know, we're saying we want to get more cars off the road, but our targets haven't changed hugely. Thank you. And while we're looking at targets on page 33 of 51, this quarter, I just need to explain for everyone's benefit too, I'm sure, the quarter result is only from a sample of 43. Is that because that's how many are going to be the sample in every quarter? Or so what do we expect to be the sample for year end? How meaningful, because data from 43 is not particularly meaningful, but how meaningful will it be by year end?
Yeah, so that particular target and the results for it come from the council's resident satisfaction survey process. So there's some more information in that sort of methodology around the total numbers to be expected to the end of the year. I don't know them off top of my head, but I
Sure.
can get them to send through to you.
Thank
But
you.
it is substantial.
But that, we do that resident satisfaction survey all year round now, don't we? So you would, so by year end, you will have a greater number than the target of 40. That's
Correct.
good, thank you. And at what point will the updated information be available? If we're going to have a spreadsheet, we're not criticising it, we're just trying to understand what it will look like maybe next time we see it.
Yeah, I can include more information around that particular phrasing for each one around the frequency. That would be of help.
No updated information appears in the status column quite often.
Yeah.
Thank you. Give something, Councillor Budget.
Page 23, item 11, attachment 1. This is in relation to emergency work. I did take the opportunity to talk today prior to the meeting. It's about the extremely dangerous condition of the road off Highway 35 into Waikato. I've had a delegation from a number of them to my house. I have a presentation to make, or they're going to do it, because, and I did ask Dave, the work really is urgent. There are fences hanging in the air. There are slides into the creek, and I understand perfectly the process they have to go through to get support from Waka Kotahi. We do have emergency funding within our reserve account. I just find the frustration a bit unacceptable because I've had to drive that road 4 times, and given the flood on the November, it's got worse. You know, sitting there with cones around it is not satisfactory. I can imagine there will be a number of whānau will come home from Christmas, New Year and be unaware of how dangerous this road is. Now I go forward, I've made my point to page 29, speed limit review. The Worship and myself and our liaison officer were on the radio in Ruatoria on Monday, and we got a bit of a hammering about the speed limit. The excessive speed from the Highway 35 into Ruatoria. Not so many years ago, there was a young child killed because the speed limit was not being adhered to. And I understand from the locals that were giving us a hard time, they have a petition coming to council. They have also done some homework in terms of what the requirements are. But I'm just seeking some advice as to how that can be expedited or sped up so that it becomes through. Those young fellas come through there at a hell of a pace, and the police are not around. Well, it's not their job to be there policing the road all the time. But this particular section is very, very dangerous. We have tried in the past to have the limit extended out further, and it still hasn't happened. So I'm just pleading the case through the Regional Transport Committee, so people are aware of it. Who's responsible at the end of the day for determining what happens, what the outcome? Is it council or is it the transport agency?
For clarity, you mean it's a local road? It's after. you
Yes,
go off
it is.
the-
It's a local road.
Thank you. You wish to respond? Thank you.
So through you, Chair, we are reviewing our regional speed management through the regional speed management plan. So we'll make sure that that feedback gets passed on to the right staff members so that they can take that into account.
Thank you.
There's a spreadsheet towards the back, but if everybody's happy with that part of the report, is someone prepared to move? It's a noting report. Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. The diagram, page 37. A while ago, we were looking at Balance Street and sort of the problems that were there, Balance Street, Foreman Road intersection. And it was identified clearly that there was a lot of concern around the proximity of the pedestrian crossing to the actual crossroads itself. Now I'm looking at this diagram and I see it might be addressed on a couple of the sides, but the one on Reeds Quay and the one on the Peel Street City end, what happens at these roundabouts is people are looking right and they're turning left. And if they're right onto the pedestrian crossing right at the start, there seems to be an element of risk there, especially when we're looking at the disabled sector and people that aren't quite as sure on their feet. They look, those two crossings there look very close to the roundabout. And it was definitely an area of concern that was identified when we were looking at the Balance Street crossing with that pedestrian crossing there that's quite close. So I'm not a road designer, but it is something that we had seen in the past, and I just do have some concern about how close those two crossings are to the roundabout.
Mr. Hadfield, would you like to respond?
Yes, that was the first cut, and so that's some of the feedback we've received from some of the stakeholder groups. So there's going to be some minor adjustments and to accommodate that. So yeah, it was noted in the feedback.
Yeah, the Reeds Key one in particular could come back quite a bit. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cranston. And you moved the receipt of the paper and seconded by Councillor Worsnop, did I see? The paper recommendation is on page 21. It says a noting report. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we move off that report,
I beg your pardon.
and I support the motion passing it. Look, not so much directed at journeys, but to all council reporting. It's critical that in reporting that Te Reo Māori, if you're going to use words, place names, that you spell them correctly. Now, there is a spell check available for Te Reo, but you also have in your council staff, although it's not necessarily their job, to check that reports and minutes with Te Reo content is correctly spelt and presented. And the only reason why I highlight that is many of these reports and minutes go to hapu iwi folk. And as you all know, they become really upset about this. And I just noticed that there were 2 misspellings in the minutes from the last hui, and also we piri should be we piri. Now, in this bigger scheme of things, it's not a big issue, but when you consider we piri who he was a significant tipuna and ainatira of this area, and those who belong to him or descend from him, who whakapapa to him, including myself, could be offended by that. So just not a word of warning, but of encouragement. If you're going to use Te Reo, be careful. I understand that you put out minutes, reports in huge volumes, so I get that. But it's just a case of being careful. And the reason why I highlight that too is the Regional Land Transport Plan, the work that was done in terms of the Te Reo content and explanation and meaning in that report or that document was significant. There was a lot of care that went into the Māori wording content of that, and I would encourage all areas or divisions within the council right across to just pause for a moment when there's a word in Māori or place name in Māori before finalising that report or those minutes. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. So that paper has been moved and put, and I now move on to the walking and cycling paper, which is 21 to 71 on page 38. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. I take the paper as read, but welcome questions from the floor over any part of it. Thank you.
Could I just
Are you
make
going
one?
to do the presentation?
Well, could I just make one comment for that?
Yeah, sure.
Just with, I've put the report, sorry, just to make sure there's no confusion. With item 5, we had the Tarahiru River Shared Walkway Cycleway. It gives an indication that council will have approved the budget. It's going through approval process. I'm sorry that I've given that indication that it's been approved. So, but I'll take any questions from you. Thank you.
The question, what's been approved?
Do you have a time frame for when you expect approval to be, or otherwise, to be confirmed?
I was hoping by the end of December.
But we do have the first 60,000 to do the business case. Is that what we're saying?
No,
Oh,
that
we
process,
don't
that's
have-
going through an approval process.
Right.
Okay,
So it's only the business case that's being developed at the moment.
that's right.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the floor with respect to any part of that paper on walking and cycling? Welcome any queries from our new people. Can you use the microphone? Please?
I was observing the National Transport Outcomes Framework. Is the council adopted that? Is that the framework that the council have adopted?
We're obliged to, because otherwise we don't get our share of the.
Okay, so that's a reference point.
Yes, it is. Would you like to expand on that? Thank you.
Yes, it's the walking and cycling is one part of a total transport, land transport package. And
Okay.
this is one section.
Okay, and so when wishing to sort of instigate or discuss a consideration in that, who is, are you yourself the person to forward some thoughts to, or under these different headings like resilience and security, for instance? How does the process work?
More than willing to talk to you after if you want. That's not a
Yes.
secret. Yeah, it's just that these are projects that have gone through a long-term plan process and a regional transport process, so they're pretty well locked in.
But you could talk them
Yeah.
briefly, or would Ms. Stewart like to give the explanation, because it is helpful for everyone to hear it.
Happy to, and happy as well if you want more detail. It's perhaps a discussion that we could go into in a little bit more detail offline. So the NLTP, the National Land Transport Plan, has just been adopted and announced for 2021 through to 2024. So as part of that process, the team at Gisborne District Council and the team at Waka Kotahi, in conjunction with iwi and other interested stakeholders, community advisors, shape up alongside the council's long-term plan, whether it's what projects they would deem to be a priority for the Gisborne region. Within that, they get then included into the regional land transport plan and enter the national moderation process. So under the NLTP, we are actually guided by the government policy statement. And underneath that, there are a certain number of activity classes that all of the projects put forward will then go into. Within that, the government sets us a minimum amount of funding that we can provide to that activity class, as well as a maximum amount of funding. All of the projects that we receive from right across the country then go into an investment prioritisation process and moderation process. And that's how we then decide against that framework which projects get funding or not. So in terms of what's in front of us, that's gone through that full process. And we're now working towards delivering those that have been approved for the Gisborne Tairāwhiti region. That's not to say that it's 100% set in stone, immovable. If something has gone forwards in the RLTP but hasn't been funded, so the walking and cycling path we were just referring to was a possible in terms of its funding, not definitely funded. We do continue to work with the district council to assess if there is other funding able to become available. Are we in a position to put that forward again into that process for funding? Does that help?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Nice.
And on that basis, how does one propose projects to go into that feasibility discussion?
So that's, am I still on?
Yeah.
That's done at the early stage. So it's not new projects necessarily coming in. So when we're developing our RLTP prior to go into the National Land Transport Fund, that's where this group would begin to develop those projects that are of a priority for your region and your community.
And would that be proposed as we're at the end of the cycle for this year? Would that be a process?
We'll probably be starting it quite soon, actually, I would
Right.
imagine.
Right.
For commencement of the next NLTF. So that's a 3-year one. So the next one will be 25 onwards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Are there specific questions to Mr. Hadfield with respect to the parts of this report, the detail are up to date?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Tēnā koe. Thank you for your report, Dave. I'm interested in, obviously I have an interest in Titirangi ao Maunga, and in that project. I just note that in the report, and I see this a lot in not just for this committee, but other reports under the heading Tangata Whenua Māori engagement not required at this stage. I'm interested to know generally, not just specifically again for your area, Dave, regarding are there mechanisms or processes in place for hapui niwi to be involved? And if there is, next question is, how do they involve themselves and when do they do so? If I could just suggest, the involvement of tangata whenua Māori should be very early on in any project, not just in the area of transport either, should be in all areas. And like the chairperson in a report, it would be helpful if the report does say, yes, there has been engagement or you've tried to engage and for various reasons that hasn't taken place. So it just gives us insight into how we can support you to attend to those matters alongside of you. Kia ora. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for the question. A lot of work has gone on to work with tangata whenua, and I'll maybe ask the Chief Executive, would you like to respond to that question? Because we have an ongoing relationship with Ngāti Onioni over to Rangi.
I missed part of the question, but we do, yeah, so we have been working with Charlotte and the whānau with Ngāti Onioni around all the developments. The team have been pretty much co-designing everything at the same pace here.
And sorry, just to clarify that too. So when I mean not required at this stage, it's probably is my report. I was saying my report is not required for consultation, but the consultation with the project has been so much that probably clarifies it.
Thank you for that, David. I'm assuming, just so we know, the CEO belongs to the Ngāti Onioni as well. But I'm assuming for all projects that there is involvement or engagement, and I'm assuming also that within the council itself, you have people who facilitate that or make those sort of things happen.
We do through the chair. So we have regular co-management hui. So under the Titirangi Reserve Management Act, it gives effect to our co-management relationship, but also the Titirangi Accord, as you'll be familiar with as well. So we do, it is very much everything that happens up there is a co-designed, co-created process.
And not just for Titirangi either, for all of the work that council does. Are there any further questions around that paper? Thank you.
I note that a number of the township plans, as we progress through them, are likely to have components that involve paths. Will they remain in a township space, or is that something that will be reported through the likes of the report that we're looking at now and future?
From a financial perspective, they'll be as the township because it's a budget, but there certainly has to be alignment. It's like we were talking with the township team to make sure that they're aligned.
I'd just like to ask a question around the cycleway, and I see the budget for the project is 650. Is that including Whakakotahi money? Because that seems to be more than I recall we put in the LTP. Thank you. And is that for phase 1 and 2, both sides of the river? Thank you, but not the bridge. Thank you. Right, do I have a mover for receipt of that paper, please? It's action points on walking and cycling. Thank you, Councillor Burdett. Thank you, Councillor Cranston. All those in favour that the contents be noted, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Thank you. So now move to regional Whakakotahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper, but I'm suspecting you're going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. Whakakotahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper, but I'm suspecting you're going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. Whakakotahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper, but I'm suspecting you're going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. Whakakotahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper, but I'm suspecting you're going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hadfield. Whakakotahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield.
Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to
Whakatahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield.
Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to
Whakatahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield.
Kia ora, everyone. It is very good
Whakatahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to Whakatahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to Whakatahi's update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to
to
update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper. Going to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. Kia ora, everyone. It is very good to update for December. Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. And we have a PowerPoint at the back of our paper.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr.
Transport is one of the key sectors. We know that it's one of our primary contributors to our emissions across Aotearoa, and Waka Kotahi is supporting the development of the government's first emissions reduction plan. And that's transport is one of the key sectors. We know that it's one of our primary contributors to our emissions across Aotearoa, and Waka Kotahi is supporting the development of the government's first emissions reduction plan. And that's transport is one of the key sectors. We know that it's one of our primary contributors to our emissions across Aotearoa. A low carbon and Waka Kotahi is supporting the development of the green package awards, but it's not a plan. And that's transport as well as the key sectors. We know that it's one of our primary contributors to our emissions across Aotearoa. A low carbon and Waka Kotahi is supporting the development of the green package awards, but it's not a plan. And that's transport as well as the key sectors. We know essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. The second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. So they're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. They're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. They're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. They're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. They're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with development drawing packages for recycling. They're the second area essentially transport low carbon CIP supporting with